Okay, let's skip the feel-good motivational language and get straight to the point. I'm going to be honest with you today and share the 4 reasons behind your financial struggles. Reason number 1 is that you reacted strongly to this title. You started listening to the first 10 or 20 seconds of this YouTube video, and it immediately struck a chord with you. This reaction actually reveals a lot about you, more than anything else. The primary cause of your financial struggles is your inability to honestly assess your current situation. Accepting criticism without defending your ego is a challenge for most people. Typically, there are 2 main aspects individuals avoid taking responsibility for: their bank account balance and their physical weight. If you're watching this video, it means you possess the resources to connect to the global economy through a device and Wi-Fi. Therefore, you have no valid excuses. In the modern day we live in, if you're still grappling with how to generate income, it's time to take accountability. However, I must clarify an important point. There are people who are content with their lower income and genuinely happy with their lives. You can perceive their authenticity in their eyes and demeanor. To those individuals, I commend you. Not everyone is destined to be a millionaire, and that's okay. But if you're watching this video, it's evident that you're dissatisfied with your financial state. Just as I'm not concerned by an overweight person who acknowledges their situation and is content, my concern arises when I encounter overweight individuals providing countless justifications for their situation. My issue is with those who attempt to justify their circumstances with unique reasons, rather than facing the truth. Such individuals lead a kind of sad existence, constantly lying to themselves, which is the gravest self-deception you can commit. It's important to remember that everyone has their imperfections. Let me illustrate with an example. I occasionally indulge in drinking. Sometimes I abstain for several weeks, while other times I might have a drink every single day in the week, especially when I'm traveling abroad with friends. I acknowledge that drinking alcohol isn't beneficial for my health, and I'm not going to attempt to argue otherwise. But the key difference is that when I choose to drink, I'm not constructing a myriad of excuses or trying to convince myself that it's somehow good for me. I simply acknowledge that it's not the best choice. I'm aware of its drawbacks, and I've made a conscious decision to go ahead with it on that particular occasion. This illustrates my capacity to objectively evaluate a situation without emotional entanglements. For instance, friends have advised me against smoking due to health concerns. While I comprehend the health risks, it's one of the things I've chosen to continue. The crucial point here is that when someone offers me constructive criticism, I'm able to consider it objectively. I can assess the situation without feeling defensive or attacked, without perceiving myself as fundamentally flawed. I can analyze matters rationally. So, the first reason for your financial struggles lies in your inability to critically assess your life without your ego getting in the way, without resorting to a barrage of excuses to justify your current circumstances. Now, let's dive into the concept of identity, which seems to have taken on an intriguing twist in 2023. It appears that in today's world, most individuals readily accept the notion that identities can be fluid and adaptable. For instance, consider how someone's preferences can shift. You might be an ardent follower of a particular sport one year, and the next you find yourself engrossed in an entirely different sport, adopting a new identity as a fan. Similarly, your style choices can morph. You might embrace a street-style aesthetic, identifying with an edgier look, only to transition into a more classic and refined persona the following year. Now here's where it gets intriguing. We've reached a point where some individuals wake up on a regular Tuesday morning without altering a single aspect of their physical appearance and yet declare, "I am now identifying as a different gender." They haven't undertaken any physical changes, but they're shifting their identity in this profound way. So let's break this down. I could wake up tomorrow and assert that I identify as a girl without any physical modifications, and many progressive voices would likely applaud this declaration as empowering. However, consider this thought experiment. What if I told someone that they could wake up tomorrow and decide not to identify as poor, but rather as rich? Would I be met with applause and encouragement? No. The reaction would be probably quite different. This stark contrast is worth examining closely. In today's world, it's widely accepted that your gender identity can be a matter of choice, something you can almost switch at will. But when it comes to your financial circumstances, the narrative changes. Those who are financially struggling don't get to conveniently declare, "I identify as rich now," without facing skepticism or criticism. It's a curious paradox we find ourselves in, don't you think? Now, keep in mind that around 200 years ago, I wouldn't have been saying the same thing. I mean, think about it. Ever since around 1840 or so, when the Bible was translated from Latin into English, information has become more accessible to everyone. People could pick up books and read, democratizing knowledge. Even a century ago, things weren't as they are now. The way things are now, literally everyone watching this can go online and access the exact same information that others used to amass huge fortunes. That information is available to them, but here's the kicker. Despite having that access, many are still stuck in the same place. So you've got to ask yourself, why? And the answer lies in your identification with being poor. This notion is so deeply embedded in your subconscious. It might have something to do with how your parents taught you about money, like how it's linked to negativity, how only dishonest people get rich, or something like that. By the way, whoever taught you these beliefs, often it's a form of defense mechanism for them. It's easy to get programmed with these ideas during your formative years, and sadly, they stick around as a persistent thought virus for your entire life. Just like the first point I discussed, you need to be able to look at your situation objectively and evaluate that you aren't where you want to be financially. But here's the kicker. You should still wake up the next morning and immediately see yourself as rich. You should embody the characteristics, the mindset, and the traits of the financially abundant version of yourself. Changing your identity can be the catalyst to changing your life. One major reason people often don't alter their identities or their beliefs about money is due to the belief in its scarcity, which, to be quite frank, just isn't the case. When you perceive money as scarce, you tend to try to amass it and hold on to it tightly. But here's the catch. When you forcefully try to draw something in, it tends to slip away instead. So instead of exerting force to pull in money, the better approach is to attract it. You've likely been conditioned throughout your life to view money as this incredibly rare resource, and consequently, you've been told to handle it with great care and caution. But here's a straightforward truth. That's not entirely accurate. Just take a look at the extensive money printing that's been occurring over the past several years. And let me tell you, this isn't a recent phenomenon. It's been going on for a century or more. Consider the establishment of the Federal Reserve, for example. Have you ever stopped to think where the money you hold comes from? It wasn't created by the government. Look deeper into this and you'll realize that we inhabit a realm where private investors own the Federal Reserve. This entity gets to generate money that the government borrows. And the fascinating part, a significant portion of this money flows to the banks. Here's the intriguing part. This money, often referred to as funny money, isn't backed by any tangible value. It's merely a perception-based entity. Its worth lies in the collective perception surrounding it. Now add to this the concept of fractional reserve banking, where banks are required to hold only a fraction of these funds in reserve. This means that they can take this funny money and multiply it several times over. Why am I sharing this? To illustrate that money is far from scarce. In fact, money is abundant. The world's monetary system as it exists reveals that money is not a finite resource. They print it, and it's not tethered to any solid foundation. Its value is rooted in perception. And when you start to understand the nitty-gritty of this global monetary structure, you realize that money is very abundant, and it has been proven to be seemingly infinite. So here's the deal. You've got a choice. You can either despise the rules of the game or play by those rules to acquire a bunch of this fiat currency, which is essentially this paper money that's accepted as valuable because everyone agrees that it is. But the real key is, what do you do with that currency afterward? You can convert it into tangible assets with actual concrete value. To put it plainly, the world's monetary system is a bit like envisioning an alternate reality where the powerful and influential individuals have gathered up all the sand in existence. Now, this sand doesn't really have much intrinsic use or value, but they've managed to persuade the rest of the population that even a single grain of sand holds considerable worth. So the entire economy revolves around these little grains of sand, despite their limited practicality. It's all built on the belief that this tiny grain of sand can buy you things, even though it's not particularly useful. However, what happens when the illusion fades? When the curtain drops and people finally realize that the sand is essentially worthless? They've been led astray, believing in something that's fundamentally valueless. Here's where I introduce you to the present global financial system. In the next 5, 10, or 15 years, we might witness a significant shift in this system. This is why, if you understand the game and play it smartly, you could gather up this so-called funny money over the upcoming decade and then trade it for genuine, tangible assets. Things that truly hold intrinsic value. So this brings me to the next point. Another reason for your financial struggle might be your lack of knowledge about money itself, its origins, and how the current monetary system operates. Regrettably, this often results in an unsettling feeling around money, as you might perceive it as a scarce resource when, in reality, it's not. In our world, there are two kinds of folks. You have the creators and the consumers. Now, the consumers pay the creators, and these creators end up becoming pretty well off. Here's the thing. You're always giving something back to someone, and you're doing that using two forms of currency: your attention or your money. In the end, both attention and money generally wind up in the pocket of the person who's managed to snag it from you. Eventually, that person gains some form of monetary benefit. Here's the core idea. You're facing financial hardships because you're not producing anything. You're just consuming. Real wealth doesn't typically come your way until you generate something that the market wants to consume. This can be a service you provide or a product you create. The point is, you need to bring value into existence, and others will be willing to pay for it. This principle also applies to your online presence. Think about it as the difference between being a creator and being a consumer. Let's talk about the digital world for a minute. You're consumers on platforms like YouTube and TikTok. And hey, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. For example, I usually spend 10 or 15 minutes watching a YouTube video when I have a nice meal. That's perfectly okay. But the real issue arises when you're spending hours each day on TikTok overindulging in consumption. Now, if this aligns with your goals, that's great. But here's the thing. Some of you might not actually aspire to be entrepreneurs. Perhaps you're content with your jobs, aiming to move up the corporate ladder and become the next CEO or CFO. If that's your path, consider deleting apps like Instagram and TikTok from your phone. They might not be serving your purpose. On the flip side, if creating content online does align with your goals, then start crafting your own content alongside consuming. So remember this, the final reason behind your financial struggles is that you're leaning way too much towards the consumer side, rather than stepping into the shoes of a creator, whether that's in the digital realm or by producing actual products and services. All right, I wanted to end this video by saying I really appreciate each and every one of you. Now, this video might sound a bit intense, and that's because I noticed that most of the time, content on the internet is too dreamlike. So I wanted to light a fire inside you, to start that business or to quit that job and go for whatever it is that you want to do. Now, you need to watch the 8 middle-class money mistakes that keep you in the rat race. These two videos will complement each other and make you unstoppable